Appalachia. Everybody in the world has a reaction to that word. Makes folks think everything from beautiful mountaintop views, dangerous hillbillies running through the woods with a rifle in one hand and a jug of shine in the other, to trailer parks, drugs, and blame near everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountains in the world. They once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch along the eastern U.S. from Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. Folks that live in these mountains have seen and endured enough things to have happened to make a preacher cuss. Hello, I'm Larry Bentley, and I was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains of Southwest Virginia. And I was raised there by folks who lived for generations right there in the heart of them old mountains. Come with me and we'll take a look at some of the odd, awful, or even legendary things that happen within my beloved mountains. And we'll be traveling around a bit, looking through the eyes of an old Appalachian at some of the crazy that done spread itself around outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 6 of Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend. Hello, my good friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome back. If you've ever been there, then you know that I'm not speaking with a forked tongue when I tell you that old mountain mist rolls in heavy over them Cable County, West Virginia hills, just like it has for thousands of years. It comes in thick enough to swallow somebody whole if they light out too far from the porch light. Today, we're traveling down them back roads of Glenwood and Hickory Ridge, West Virginia. We're going to be talking about a mother, a daughter who was a poor woman caught in a storm that didn't end even when her soul took leave and headed home. This ain't a story just about somebody taking another's life. It's about the undercurrents that live in the legal system and about how the truth can get buried deeper in any grave any of us could dig, and how a family love can outlast a nightmare that make a whole passel of folks just throw up their hands and call it quits. Of course, the folks I'm talking about have themselves them strong Appalachian spine combined with the patience of Job stirred in for good measure. If you ever read the good book of Job, you know that patience in this case means staying the course and determined not to quit, period. Sometimes folks don't know who they're messing with when they come messing around Appalachia. Sometimes and somehow, Mountain Karma comes along to right a few wrongs. Have you sit down and grab a cold drink and let me tell you what could be the very definition of outright dirty shame compounded by another outright dirty shame, then topped off with 5 across the eyes for the cherry on top. Now, to understand everything that happened in that holler, we have to take a look at Deanna Crawford first. She was born into this world on a cold February day in 1981 and was a child of the mountains, born to Terry and Brenda. Even after the family split and Terry married her stepmother, Angie, Deanna was the heartbeat of a house full of 4 brothers. The folks that knew her didn't talk about her struggles. First thing they talked about was her hair. It's red as a sugar maple in fall, and a smile so big that it took up her whole face. But yeah, there's that big fat butt again. By 2002, that smile was masking a heavy burden. Deanna was 21 years old and she was a mother. She had an almost 2-year-old son who was her absolute pride and joy. She loved being a mom, but she was fighting a war. And that war was a tough uphill battle for anybody that locks horns with crack cocaine. I've seen it, along with Oxycontin and meth, get a hold of some real good friends of mine and just to destroy them from inside out. It's a sad thing to see. In fact, once you get called out to pick up some of your best friends that you went all the way through school with, and I mean from kindergarten all the way through high school, that'll finally do it for your rescue work. Trust me on that one. Anyway, to support her addiction that pretty much held her hostage, Deanna had to do what most folk do when it gets hold of you. It forces them out to work the streets. By August of 2002, she was drifting around, staying in what the court called crack house with a man named Grant McClure, or bunking for a spell with a man named Mike Sinclair. She was a young woman on the edge, walking an endless tight wire over a dark holler that she couldn't see no way out of. August in West Virginia is a pretty warm month for them mountains. On August 8, 2002, a company of loggers were working the timber near an old abandoned farm on Hickory Ridge. Now, the air was full of what we all smell when we go out there, the pine and wild onion. But as they got near an old sagging shed, the smell changed, and they all knew it wasn't a good thing. They went to find out what was what, and laying down in the weeds, they found her. It was Deanna. She was naked from the waist down, her tank top pushed up, her pants laying right there in the dirt beside her like a piece of waste. Now, the autopsy told an awful story. She'd been strangled. There wasn't any mention of physical outrage like you'd expect, seeing how she was found and all, but the scene was a mess of human leavings. Near her body was 5 cigarette butts, a beer can, a skull can, and a glass mug of all things. Now, the investigators pulled DNA from them cigarettes, and from under Deanna's fingernails, they even found semen on her clothing. Now, in 2002, they had the keys to the DNA lock, but the way I understand it, they just refused to stick them keys in the keyhole and turn the lock. I do understand back then it was mighty expensive to have DNA testing done, but in a case like this, you blame sure better if you don't want your law enforcement creds flushed down the toilet like one of them little gherkin turds you get after you eat too much Cheez Whiz. But before any official suspects ever entered the scene, there were folks in them mountains that were talking, and the police apparently went on ahead and tuned them completely out. A week before the loggers found Deanna, a friend named Rachel saw her. Rachel claimed that Deanna had robbed Michael Sinclair's place. A day earlier, on August 4th, Deanna showed up in a Speedway security camera at 3 o'clock in the morning with a man named Ira Crockett. That was the last person that she was seen with, and it was on video. But then there was John Vinton. John was an out-of-towner and a regular client of Deanna's who felt he'd been burned some way or another. He thought Deanna had robbed him. A woman named Betty Cull, who worked for the health department, told the tale that John had come to see her twice, begging for Deanna's address. When Betty refused him the second time on August 5th, she said that Mr. Vinton looked her right in the eye and said, "Nobody will have to worry about that girl robbing anybody else. Her body's up on Hickory Ridge in an old shack." Deanna's body would officially be found exactly there 3 days later. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the mystery. A pissed-off man pretty much admits to murdering a missing woman, then tells a woman exactly where to find her body. Now, it's a closed case in pretty much any holler I've been in, but the police didn't charge him. They did have enough gumption to go over and search his place. Of course, it took them a few months to get around to it. They were probably shocked when, with the swiftness they moved in on and all, when they probably found nothing at all that could tie him to the crime. John Vinton, well, he would just go on and take whatever secrets he was hiding to his grave in 2006. If I was to guess what happened, I'd say he probably popped, snorted, run up, or smoked something that put a permanent quiver in his liver and led to his new job as a daisy pusher trainee at the cemetery. But in 2007, the case was as cold as a mountain creek in January. That's when a man named Greg Bailey came stepping up into the police station. Greg was a long-time drug user with a nice long rap sheet of his own, and he had a story to tell. Now, of course, we need to listen to him because the man that confessed done took a big dirt nap, and now he can't hanging on him like a yoke on an ox. Anyway, drug head Bailey said his nephew, Brian DeMint, and 3 other boys done killed that girl up on the ridge 5 years back. Brian DeMint was 26 years old, but he wasn't like other men his age. He struggled with severe learning disabilities and a bipolar condition. Everything I read about him says he was a soft-hearted, kind person that could be convinced that he actually killed somebody that he'd never even seen. So we can imagine how that played out in the police interrogation, can't we? So, since the man who confessed in assumed room temperature, the state troopers dragged Brian in for a nice long talk. Over hours and hours, they worked him. Brian signed 2, well, some say 3, totally different confessions, and all of them were a mess. In one, he said he did it. In another, he said Philip Barnett did it. In one version, had them all leaving together. Another said that they left him behind, so he had to walk 17 miles to a gas station and call a cab, which just happens to be in an area where no cab company had ever turned a wheel over in history. Yet, based on Brian's network web of tales, the police pounced on the Barnett brothers, Philip and Nathan, and dragged them downtown. Justin Black heard they were looking for him and showed up at the station voluntarily, wanting to know why they had his name in their mouth. They escorted him right into the hot box for a chat. He denied ever seeing Deanna Crawford in his entire life, but he was on parole. He claimed the police pretty much told him that if he didn't give them a story, his parole was getting flushed down the toilet, and ass was going directly to cell, do not pass go, do not collect $200. So he gave him a story. He said that he was there, but he was just taking a whiz by the cars while the other ones went to the shed to do whatever the heck it was they was doing. At that point, so I'm told, the DNA was tested. The DNA results came back, and none of it. Not cigarettes, not fingernails, not even the semen matched Brian, Justin, Philip, or Nathan. And normally that's where police would open up the jail, let the suspects be, and go on back to square one. Well, that didn't happen here, or I wouldn't be talking about it, would I? The police didn't care. Hell, they had confessions, and in the eyes of the law, I guess, in them parts back then, a signed paper must have been worth more than the truth. The legal machine started to grind away. Brian DeMint took a plea for second-degree murder and agreed to be the state's star witness. 2 days later, he told a private investigator, "We're all innocent. I got the details from my uncle who got them from the police." But when the trial started in 2008, Brian was back on the stand, pointing his finger. In Justin Black's trial, the defense brought up a witness named Sherry Faulkner. She lived on Hickory Ridge. She testified that just before the body was found, she saw a young woman in a black tank top running down the road, being stalked by a man in a red pickup truck. One man, not 4. Hell, it didn't matter. 4 birds in handcuffs are worth one on the run or in the ground. But the jury looked at Brian DeMint and, well, they saw straight up gospel truth according to Brian. That meant that Justin Black was sentenced to 40 years. Brian got 30. The Barnett brothers followed right behind him, with sentenced to 40 and 36 years respectively, eventually taking Alford pleas to manslaughter just to stop the bleeding, even as they maintained they never touched that girl in their lives. Years passed and the boys became men behind bars, but while they were sitting in cells, the DNA was sitting in a lab, waiting for the rest of it to be tested and for the world to catch up. In 2016, the Exoneration Project and the Innocence Project finally forced the state to run the rest of the DNA through the national database, CODIS. I reckon because they were afraid to do it because they might find something, but the CODIS machine didn't stutter when it came back with a hit. Now, the semen in Deanna's clothing and the rest of the DNA slung all over the scene belonged to a man they only identified as T.S. He wasn't a local party boy or a friend of Brian DeMint. He was a convicted sex offender, a man who'd been living in West Virginia at the time of the murder and was currently in Ohio prison for crimes against a child. Now, when the investigators went to see old dog squeeze T.S., he denied knowing Deanna. I don't know what they expected him to say, but he dropped the bombshell. He said 2 West Virginia state police officers had visited him 2 days earlier and told him to keep his yap shut. I expect that was followed by the obligatory "or else." Now, the investigators started digging into T.S.'s past, and they found 3 ex-wives with stories that would turn your blood to ice. One said T.S. came home one summer night in 2002 with blood on all over his front, back, both arms, neck, chest, neck, and head, and was carrying a fistful of folding money. Another said he'd bragged about killing a sex worker. Folks, at that point, the truth wasn't just coming out, it was running around, waving its arms, screaming it at the top of its lungs. Once again, the legal machine started grinding away, this time at the speed of a brain-damaged slug. It took until 2021 for the final curtain to finally fall. After years of fighting, after the DNA proved they weren't even there, after Brian DeMint admitted for at least the 100th time that he'd made it all up because he was scared and confused, the state finally did something that bureaucrats hardly ever do. Well, they threw up their hands and gave in. On October 5th, 2021, the charges against Nathan, Philip, and Justin were dismissed, and they walked out into the West Virginia air as free men. But I reckon the fact that they'd left their youth behind in a cage didn't matter much to said bureaucrats. But Brian DeMint was released on time served, and the state reverted back to the "we didn't do nothing wrong" attitude that they usually have, and as a result of that, they refused to vacate his conviction. They said that he hadn't maintained his innocence the same way the others had. That, despite the fact that there wasn't no more evidence against him than there was the others, no matter who said it, what, or whatever. But in other words, they thought, screw the evidence and the fact that they coerced the poor man till he would have told him that pigs could fly. He was going to stay on the hook for something that somebody else did anyway. Then to ice the cake, because bureaucrats like to ice the cake for everybody, but with a nice thick coat of bullshit, the state stepped up to the microphone and announced that they wouldn't be pursuing TS for the murder because, shucks, well, he was already out of prison. Yeah, folks, no need to upset his life over something like cold-blooded murder since the wrong people have done been in jail and all. Now we know why they didn't release his name, don't we, folks? Something called Mountain Karma. Today, if you go to Hickory Ridge, the abandoned farm's still there, rotting into the soil. Deanna Crawford's son is a man now, raised by a family that never stopped loving him or his mother. But questions still hang in the mountain air like a bad smell. Why did the police ignore a man who predicted where the body was found? Why did they ignore a witness who saw a red truck stalking Deanna? And why did they threaten a man's parole to get a story that the DNA proved was a lie? Tammy Burnett, the mother of Nathan and Philip, hadn't stopped asking. She turned the spotlight on the state troopers, asking why they chose to railroad 4 local boys instead of catching a predator who was hiding in plain sight. Now, Deanna Crawford was a girl with a giant smile and a heavy cross to bear. She deserved a little justice that looked at the facts, and not justice that looked like at a pack of scapegoats for getting by to write the case off. Today, as you look at them Appalachian ridges, remember Deanna, and remember that the truth don't always come from a badge or a gavel. Sometimes the truth is just a voice in the woods waiting for somebody to stop and listen. Stay safe, my good friends. Keep that shiny side up, the greasy side down, and keep your eyes on the road of life. Hope you got something from our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, or Rumble, throw us a like. And don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you watch or listen. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend podcast group on Facebook, where we talk Appalachian or about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian murder, mystery, or legend. I will see you then.